Victor Burton here on behalf of the Australian Leadership Project. Recently I was privileged to be joined by Jan Owen AM to talk about Australian leadership. Jan Owen is the CEO of the Foundation for Young Australians and shared her views on contemporary leadership and the leadership to come.
So Jane, what is unique about Australian leadership and leaders?
I think there's a couple of things. I think firstly Australian leaders are kind of what I call WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. And I think that's what makes them unique in the world. I think everyone, when they meet an Australian leader kind of anywhere in the world, kind of knows that what you see is what you get, and it's kind of the no BS kind of factor. So I think that's really powerful because I think that leads to, at a kind of macro level, this idea of Australia being a kind of honest, open and relatively transparent country, and I think that's very powerful for us globally. I think there's another Australian leadership trait which is kind of this sort of self-effacing, kind of self-deprecating humour, which also can kind of lead into leadership a little bit, and I think it has its strengths and weaknesses. I think it has a strength in that we, again, are kind of very real and try to be very grounded as people, but it also, the kind of, obviously the flip side of that is this tall poppy syndrome where we kind of cut people down if they go too far or have too much aspiration or too much ambition. So I think that's kind of got a two-edged sword, that kind of self-deprecating humour. Do we really back ourselves in the way that we should is, I think, the challenge out of that. And then I think a third part of the Australian, and certainly I see it in this generation and the generations coming, that I think we've always had it, is this kind of egalitarian leadership. And so this idea that collaborative leadership and that people working together, that people have different roles. I absolutely see the next generation really looking for a collaborative leadership model, and you see it in organisations and companies where they go and work for, where they have no problem fronting up to the CEO, and in previous generations nobody would ever have thought to do that. So there is kind of a egalitarianism which I think is very powerful, and again I think keeps us kind of honest and transparent, and certainly the next generation are looking for opportunities not so much to lead but to be in positions where they can try things and do things differently and get the opportunity to step up. And I think that's a very powerful thing that can happen in Australia because of our WYSIWYG, our kind of self-deprecating kind of real groundedness, but also our kind of flat collaborative kind of way of working.
So Jane, tell me, what do you think Australians want from their leaders today?
I think Australians are looking for a couple of things. I think number one is this idea of, do we have a vision for the future? And I don't mean kind of a big blue sky. I mean, can our leaders say to us, this is north, we're all kind of heading north. We're heading north because we think it will have these benefits to our country and to us in the context of the region and the globe. And here's kind of a blueprint. It's not going to be a perfect blueprint. We don't have all the answers, but let's kind of get on the same page and agree that this is kind of what North looks like. And if we were to put our efforts and our thinking and our education and our minds and our passions and our creativity behind that, it would be phenomenal to see where Australia could go. So I think that kind of true North is one thing that Australians are looking for. As I said before, I think Australians are also looking for a new kind of leadership that is much more collaborative. On the one hand, we expect our leaders to be these kind of pristine, pure as the driven snow, kind of untouchable leaders, but on the other hand, we want them to be very, very kind of connected to us. And so from my perspective, the good leader today actually can traverse that kind of, I have an aspiration, I have a moral compass, but I'm also able to really connect with people and to what's going on for you and to what's going on for your community and your family. And I think, by the way, that's really difficult because we're in a 24/7 kind of cycle where every single thing that you do, whether you like it or not, is kind of on display. And I think that's really difficult for leaders, and I really feel for political leaders today. I think it's very, very, very tough. And the third thing I think we want from our leaders is really this I think we want this idea that they have a lived experience of kind of the world. And if there's one criticism that's come about around our political leaders, and why I think we've seen these new different groups, and some of them are political organisations kind of cropping up, is I think people have a sense that those people have had more real world experience. So if the political system just keeps pulling people through its own kind of narrow path, from, you know, a university student to an advisor to a junior politician to a politician, I don't feel like we think we're getting the diversity of lived experience, of worldview, and of kind of thinking and real ability to solve problems. So there's a need for us to have leaders that are well experienced, actually, and have a worldview and have a world experience. And there's probably no more important time for that than right now, as we are, you know, literally stepping into the vast global kind of environment that we're in. So I want our leader to have a big worldview, to have a really grounded lived experience, and to have a moral purpose and a sense of a true north.
Tell me, thinking about your own life, your own life's journey, who have been your leaders and the people who've inspired you?
I think I had some really traditional kind of people who inspired me. You know, my parents helped set up Lifeline in Australia, and I often think about the fact that in those days when Lifeline was established, you kind of took a call, you know, at your desk or at the hotline, you put the phone down and you actually drove to where there was a problem or a crisis or someone in need, and you helped them live. And we would have, through my whole childhood, people coming to stay at our place who kind of needed to get back on their feet and get new opportunities and kind of find new direction in their life. I think later on I was inspired by going to a school that, although I was a very, very poor failed student, that actually allowed me to do a whole lot of other things at school, including setting up social enterprises and kind of new programs for young people, and to reach out in the community. And I think when I got into the kind of social change area, the person who really inspired me very early was Anita Roddick, who actually set up the Body Shop, and I got the opportunity to meet her when I was in my early 20s. And what inspired me about her was she really was one of the very first people who understood that you could have social business and create business for good, that you could have entire supply chains which were really ethical, because the supply chains to the Body Shop were actually women in developing countries like Africa who were supplying directly to the Body Shop. So I was very inspired by this idea that business could do good in the world, and that social business and social enterprise was a really different way of thinking about service delivery or helping people to find their own path and to create their own opportunities. So I think I was always inspired by people who wanted to contribute kind of selflessly, but also by really smart people who had worked out ways to do that, which added real value to the world. One of my favourite stories of Australian leadership at the moment are the stories of young leaders in Australia. So people like Jordan O'Reilly, who set up a not-for-profit called Fighting Chance to ensure that his brother, who had severe disabilities, had access to work. And Jordan ran that as a not-for-profit for a few years, and then he saw the advent of the NDIS, and through that discovered a real opportunity to transform the NDIS and really innovate into it by setting up Higher Up, which is a platform where people with disabilities can actually choose who they want as their carers. And on the other side, Jordan's building up this army of young students who are in applied health, who are now working with and getting experience in working with people with disabilities. So a kind of entire new platform to bring a new demand and supply system together. And I think that's really inspired and kind of innovative leadership, and it comes from also a place of purpose and meaning, which is one of the things that we're really seeing in young leaders in Australia, is this kind of desire to have meaningful and purposeful lives, and to create change, though, in whole systems.
Well, that's a big thank you to Jan Owen. I think we've learnt a heck of a lot about contemporary thinking on Australian leadership and the future of Australian leadership. If you'd like to share your stories on Australian leadership or read our other stories and interviews, please visit our website, australianleadership.com, or join us via social media on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Have a great day.